You've noticed this before, even if you've never put it into words. The more you try to impress, the more something seems to slip away. The conversation cools down, her interest wavers, and you're left with that uncomfortable feeling of doing everything right and still being ignored. It's not a coincidence, and deep down, you know it. You've experienced this pattern more times than you'd like to admit. You send the perfect message. You respond quickly. You show attention. You make yourself available, and for some reason, the energy changes. She takes longer to respond. She becomes less engaged, less curious, less present. It is at this point that the conflict arises that almost no one understands. Why, when you try harder, does the value seem to diminish? Why does what should bring you closer push you away? The problem isn't what you say, it's what you communicate without realizing it. There's a silent language happening all the time, an emotional reading that doesn't come through words. The human brain is trained for this. It associates value with what isn't fully available, desire with what requires reading, interest with what isn't fully revealed from the start. And when everything is too easy, too predictable, the system simply shuts down. When you try to impress, even if you think you're being kind or interested, what comes across on the other side is something else entirely. What comes across is a feeling of neediness, of effort, of someone trying to be chosen. And neediness has a curious effect. It eliminates tension. It removes the mystery. It transforms you into something understandable too quickly. And what is understood too quickly rarely occupies space in the mind. Perhaps you've already experienced this firsthand. When you stop trying so hard, when you step back without playing games, when you become quieter than expected, something changes. She starts to initiate conversation, to show curiosity, to want to understand what's happening, not because you did something extra, but because you stopped doing something excessively. You created a void, and a void generates movement. Female behavior responds much more to feeling than to logic. It's not about how much you do, it's about how she feels around you. Security mixed with mystery, stability without total surrender, presence without visible effort. When you overperform, when you try to prove your worth all the time, you kill exactly that. You transform desire into certainty, and certainty doesn't spark imagination. Perhaps the most unsettling phrase is this: to impress is to try to prove your worth. Those who have value don't prove it. And the shock isn't in the phrase itself, it's in realizing how many times you've done the opposite. How many times have you tried to be more interesting, more available, more present, thinking that this would create a connection, when in reality you were diluting your own emotional strength? If this sounds familiar, it's because you've already been in this dynamic without realizing it. And the most unsettling thing is knowing that there's a specific point where everything starts to change. A detail in posture, an almost invisible adjustment. Something that, when you understand it, flips the entire switch of attraction. But that isn't happening yet. There comes a point when you realize that continuing as you are means choosing the same ending, the same lukewarm conversations, the same doubts, the same feeling of always being one step behind. And the truth is simple, though uncomfortable. Nothing changes until you decide to change. Not for her, for yourself. From the moment you stop reacting automatically and start acting consciously, something reorganizes itself. Your energy changes, your presence feels different. If this resonated with you, perhaps it's worth leaving a comment, not an explanation, just a silent marker of decision. And when you like or subscribe here, it's not because of the video. It's as if you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to repeat the same pattern. And that already changes a lot. Now comes the part that almost no one understands. When you stop trying to please her, something silent begins to happen inside her head. Even if nothing changes on the outside, you don't disappear, you don't become cold, you simply stop forcing your presence. And this small adjustment breaks a pattern she already knew. The pattern of the predictable, available, always ready man. When the pattern breaks, the brain goes on alert. Not out of fear, but out of curiosity. You create space, and space is rare. Space isn't absence, it's autonomy. It's you remaining there without revolving around it. It's responding calmly. It's not rushing to fill every silence. This space becomes a specific void, and the void draws attention. The human mind hates emotional gaps. It tries to close cycles, understand signals, reorganize expectations. Without realizing it, it starts thinking about you to resolve something that was left open. Before, everything was too clear. Now it isn't. Before, she knew exactly what to expect. Now she doesn't. And this uncertainty creates tension, a light, silent, constant tension. It's not anxiety. It's interest in motion. Desire is born much more from this state than from pretty words or exaggerated gestures. When you stop trying to please, you stop giving ready-made answers. Silence changes its function. It ceases to be absence and becomes presence. Its calmness begins to contrast with the hurried pace of her world. Its stability creates a fixed point. And that's when something curious happens. The less you try to be remembered, the more you appear in her thoughts. Because now there's something to decipher, something that isn't entirely accessible. She starts to wonder why you're not trying to impress her, if you've lost interest, or if you simply don't need to prove anything. And this doubt becomes a mirror. She looks inward and notices her own reaction. She realizes she's more attentive, more curious, perhaps even a little more invested than she'd like to admit. This doesn't happen because you did something extra, but because you stopped doing too much. Perceived value changes when effort ceases to be visible. What seems scarce gains weight. What isn't offered all the time becomes something to choose. You don't need to dramatically distance yourself. Just don't compete for attention. Just don't over-explain yourself. Just trust that your presence doesn't need to be validated every minute. The mind doesn't fall in love with excess. It clings to what it doesn't fully understand. And the more you allow it to fill in the gaps on its own, the more involved it becomes in that process. Thinking about yourself becomes an internal activity, not a response to what you do externally. And that is powerful. Perhaps this is making you rethink recent attitudes. Messages that didn't need to be sent, silences that could have been respected, attempts at control disguised as care. It's not about guilt, it's about awareness. About realizing that attraction responds to its own emotional logic. If at any point you feel that this turning point has already begun, perhaps it makes sense to mark it. Not with long explanations, just with something simple like, "I choose to change," or "I stop trying." Writing this down might be the first sign that you understand the invisible game that begins now. And perhaps you'll realize that this slight unease isn't fear, it's expectation. Something is slowly forming. And you feel that there's still a deeper layer about to be revealed when you're ready to sustain the silence without running from it, trusting that the next part will touch exactly on that sensitive, still open point. And here's the secret that changes everything, although almost no one notices when it starts to work. It's not something you do to her. It's something you maintain within yourself. A silent, almost invisible posture, but one that completely alters how you are perceived. You stop acting like someone searching for answers and start existing as someone who already has a direction, and that changes the whole game. You start acting like someone who has a full life, not in a performative sense, but a real one. Their attention isn't always available because it's already occupied with something that matters. You don't need to announce it, they sense it. People sense when they aren't the absolute center of someone's world. And curiously, This doesn't push them away. It brings them closer because it creates perceived value. It creates the feeling that being with you is a choice, not an automatic right. You also stop seeking validation, not that explicit, obvious validation, but the subtle kind. The kind that appears when you over-explain, when you try to align expectations, when you want to ensure that everything is all right all the time. When that disappears, there's room for the right kind of tension, a calm tension. And calmness is a powerful sign of emotional security. Those who don't need to prove anything can maintain silence without fear. You choose, you don't beg. That's an internal shift. You remain interested, but you're not available at any cost. You don't negotiate your presence, you offer, and offering is very different from asking. Behavior changes in small details. You observe more, you listen more, you react less. And this creates a subtle inversion. While you seem more stable, she begins to move. You respond with presence, not anxiety. Presence is when you are fully present, even for a short time. Anxiety is when you are always there, but scattered, worried, anticipating losses. When anxiety leaves, what remains is density. Each interaction weighs more. Each conversation leaves a trace, and traces occupy thought. You show interest without trying to win them over. It seems contradictory, but it's not. Winning someone over presupposes convincing them. Genuine interest doesn't convince them. It allows them to come. It allows the bond to grow at the right pace. And the right pace is almost never the fastest. It's the most sustainable. In practice, this manifests in simple ways. Instead of trying to impress, you observe. You observe reactions, silences, changes in tone. Instead of chasing after someone, you remain stable. You don't disappear, you don't cling. Instead of proving your worth, you allow it to be perceived, and what is perceived effortlessly seems rarer. It is at this point that attachment begins to emerge unannounced, because now there is room for her to invest, for her to miss you, for her to wonder where you are, even knowing that you are fine. When you stop trying to be chosen, that's when she starts to choose you, not as a rational decision, but as an emotional movement. If you keep trying to impress, you'll continue to be forgotten. But if you change your posture, something starts to happen even when you're not present. And maybe now you feel that this change isn't external, it's internal, an axis adjustment. If it makes sense, mark this moment in your own way, maybe by writing something like, "I stand by my posture," or "I stop begging" in the comments. Not for others, for yourself.